The death penalty dates back to ancient times. The earliest written sources date to the time of the Babylonians, who drew up the well-known Code of Hammurabi, a set of laws based on the an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth principle. The same practice was later adopted by the Egyptians, several pre-Columbian civilizations, and subsequently remained in Greek and Roman systems too. Specifically, Plato was the first to favor the educational purpose of punishment. According to him, the death penalty was to be imposed only for extremely serious offenses, by distinguishing between curable and incurable individuals. In the Middle Ages, the Church was the first absolute supporter of capital punishment and called for the execution of whomever it deemed heretical. St. Augustine of Hippo and St. Thomas Aquinas were very important figures in the Middle Ages because they were two of the first major Christian thinkers to analyze the death penalty through a theological lens, albeit rather covertly. St. Thomas Aquinas, for example, supported capital punishment when social order and public well-being were threatened. However, he also spoke about medicinal punishment, that is to say that if keeping the criminal alive to give him the possibility of repentance had healed him from his own evil, there would have been no need to kill the evildoers, but at the same time it was necessary to prevent the criminal from harming the community. However, it was during the Age of Enlightenment, characterized by a tendency towards rationality, that an actual debate arose about the application of the death penalty. Cesare Beccaria, in On Crime and Punishment, demonstrated the illegitimacy of the death penalty, considered useless and ineffective, condemned the fact that it was made into a spectacle, criticized the injustice of the politics of the time, and said that a state had to be strong, that is to say capable of punishing criminals, and among the proportional punishment for crimes against society, Beccaria mentions as a replacement for the death penalty forced labor. Beccaria's thought was particularly appreciated by Voltaire and at the same time criticized by philosophers such as Kant, Hegel, and Nietzsche. Hegel, for example, argued that the criminal had the right to be sentenced to death because it freed him and allowed him to be recognized as a rational being. Many generations of European writers followed Beccaria, beginning principally with Victor Hugo, a leading figure in French Romanticism. This literary movement did not just discuss aspects of crime and punishment. In fact, the protagonist, widely analyzed in many of Hugo's works, is the ego with all its frames of mind. In his novel The Last Day of a Condemned Man, Victor Hugo focuses on the emotions of the protagonist, who will realize shortly that he soon will take his final breath, and describes his sense of guilt in the days of waiting in prison before the execution. Oscar Wilde, too, the leading proponent of English aestheticism, shows in his work The Ballad of Reading Gaol a strong attachment to life through an exaltation of the feeling of Christian piety, very strong among prisoners on the fateful day of death. In the 20th century, there were two other notable figures, Albert Camus and Leonardo Sciascia. In particular, Sciascia, in his novel Porte Aperte, set during the fascist era, disputes the regime's thesis that the death penalty is an effective deterrent that will contain criminality, because the regime used it purely for the purposes of propaganda and resorted to physical violence to safeguard public order. Concerning the Church, for many centuries it was not exempt from the use of the death penalty, although it was applied only in very serious and extreme cases. Only in 2018, Pope Francis eliminated all the exceptions, stating in the light of the Gospel that the death penalty is an attack on the inviolability and dignity of the person, and that God, as a good and merciful Father, never refuses forgiveness to his children and waits patiently for them to return to him. Jesus in the Gospel, while not expressing himself specifically on the practice of the death penalty, talking with the Pharisees, mentions the law of retaliation that was introduced according to the Old Testament by the ancient tribes of Israel, encouraging to put aside their lust for revenge in favor of listening to their hurt and conscience. Moreover, Jesus states that no one is without sin, and exhorts us to both forgive and love our enemies. To better understand the message of Jesus, the mission carried out on that front in Singapore by Sister Gerard Fernandez is as significant as it is admirable. She assisted 18 men and women sentenced to death in the years before their execution, bringing them back to faith and introducing them to the mercy and love of Christ. On December 18, 2007, the UN approved the Universal Moratorium on the Death Penalty that states that the practice of capital punishment is a violation of the right to life, constituting instead a murder committed by the state that does not act as a deterrent and does not give the criminal the opportunity to redeem himself. This document, however, has the sole purpose of exhorting and advising. In fact, to date, 56 countries have not yet abolished the death penalty, among which the United States, China, India, Iran, and Saudi Arabia. There were 690 executions in 2018, excluding those unreported by China. Camus called it a disgusting butchery, a barbaric and violent practice by which a state puts itself on the same moral level as the murderer. Can't the numerous executions actually bring a greater good to society? A world that does not allow the re-education and survival of a human being will ever be a better world?